Hello everyone, welcome back to the new episode of my tutorial series on software development. In the previous episode, we have successfully created a business logic layer for our transaction module, where we created getter and setter for transaction and transaction details. In this episode, we will create a data access layer for our transaction module, where we will create a method to insert transaction and transaction detail. So without further delay, let's move to our tutorial. So first of all, we'll need to open our project, which is AnyStore, and open project and open solution file. So AnyStore.solution is my project file, so I'll double click on it and open in Visual Studio. So this is the product form. Let's close this and let's go to Solution Explorer, and in BLL we created transaction detail and transaction BLL in previous video. In this video we will create data access layer, so go to DAL folder and right click on DAL folder and click on add and new item, and here select class and give the name. It will be, first one will be transaction DAL, and now click on add or press enter. So this is it. Now we have successfully created transaction DAL class. So first step is to create a connection string. So create a string variable, and it will be, sorry, v, it's not b here, so variable. So static string my connection string is equals to configuration manager dot NCTI connection are strings, and here we will pass connection strings, which is connection string which we created in app.config file, and last one is connection string. So that's it. Now let's hover over the error and click on show potential fixes and click on first option, which is system, using system.configuration. So this is it, we solve our error. Now we need to create a method to insert transaction. So let's create a region for that. So hash region insert transaction method. That's it, and let's end the region. Now we will create a boolean type method, which is public bool insert transaction, and here we will pass transaction BLL. So TRANSACTI transaction BLL T, and we also need to get the value of the row inserted. So we will write out after comma and integer transaction ID. So we will get the ID of the transaction, latest transaction, and return it. So that's it. So it will be used for inserting the transaction. So don't worry about this, I will discuss about it in another episode. It will be used while inserting transaction. So let's hover over the error, which is transaction BLL. So just hover over the transaction BLL and click on show potential fixes, and click on using AnyStore.bll. So this is it, it was transactions BLL, and we still have one error, which is because this boolean type method requires one value to be returned. So we will create a boolean value and return it. Create a boolean value and set its default value to false. So bool is success is equals to false, and we will return it. Return is success. now the error is solved. So before that, we also need to assign a value to transaction ID. So let's assign its value to -1. So tran transaction ID is equals to -1. So that's it. Now all our errors are solved, but let's define it by in our comment. So set the out transaction ID value to -1, that is -1. Now before return and after transaction ID, we need to write actual code to insert the transaction in our database. So I will start with try block. So try, and another one is catch. So exception ex, and we will display a message if we have any exceptional errors. So ex dot message box dot show, sorry, not ex dot message, it is message box dot show ex dot message. So that's it. Now hover over the error and click on show potential fixes, and click on first option, which is using system.windows.form. So that's it. Now last one is finally. So finally connection, we haven't created a SQL connection yet. So after transaction ID, we need to create a SQL connection. So create a SQL connection first. So SQL connection con is equals to new, and SQL connection we will be using my connection string, which we created earlier here. So hover over the error and click on show potential fixes, and using system.data.sql client. So we fix the error, and in finally we will close the connection. So connection dot close, this will close the database connection. Now in try block, we'll write the code. First step is to write the SQL query to insert transactions. So SQL query to insert transactions. So string SQL equals insert into tbl underscore transaction, and then we will write the columns of tbl transaction. Let's go to Server Explorer and see our table transaction. So cyrus.any store, and go to tables, expand it, and go to tbl transaction, it is transactions. So I'll need to write transactions and expand our table, which is tbl underscore transactions. So we need to pass type, DCOS ID, grand total, transaction date, tax, discount, and added by. We do not need to pass ID since it is an auto increment, so it will be added automatically. So let's start with type. So first one is type, then dealer or customer ID, that is DCOS ID, and then type DCOS ID, then grand total and transaction date. So grand total and transaction date, after that transaction date, and after that tax, discount, and added by. So it will be tax and then discount, and last one is added by. So that's it, guys. Now we need to copy all inside the parenthesis. So select it and press Ctrl and C to copy, and after that press space and type values, and let's paste it here by pressing Ctrl and V. And before all of these, we need to add @ sign. So @type, @DCOS ID, @grand total, @transaction date, @tax, @discount, and @added by. So this is it. This is the query to insert the transactions in our database. Now let's create a SQL command to pass the value in SQL query. So SQL command cmd is equals to new SQL command using SQL and con. Now we need to pass the value to the SQL query using cmd. So passing the value to SQL query using cmd. So cmd dot parameters dot add with value, and then add the rate type, here t dot type, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value, add the rate dcost id, so t dot dcost id, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value, here add the rate grand total, and then t dot grand total. After that we have transaction date, so cmd dot parameters dot add with value, add the rate transaction date, and t dot transaction date. Another one is tax, so cmd dot parameters dot add with value, add the rate tax, so t dot tax. After that we have cmd dot parameters dot add with value, so add the rate discount, so here t dot discount. And last one is dot parameters dot add with value, here add the rate added underscore by, and t dot added by. So that's it, guys. Now we need to open the database connection, so open database connection, so connection dot open. Now we need to, after opening the database connection, we need to execute the query, so execute the query. For executing query we will be using execute scalar instead of execute non-query. So the difference between execute non-query and execute scalar is that execute non-query returns the number of rows affected after executing the query, but the executing scalar returns the value of first column of first row. So here we'll be using execute scalar. For that we need to create object o, so object object o equals cmd dot execute scalar. So that's it. So if the query is executed successfully, then the value of o, object o, will not be null, else the value of object o will be null. So if the query is executed successfully, then the value will not be null, else it will be null. So let's check it out. If o is not equals to null, then query executed successfully, else failed to execute query. So when the query is executed successfully, we will change the value of transaction ID and our value of each success will be true. So the transaction ID will be transaction ID is equals to int dot parse o dot to string. So that's it. Now we need to change the value of each success to, so each success is equals to true, else the value of each success will be false. So that's it, guys. We have successfully created a data access layer for inserting transaction, and we also created a method to insert transaction. So this is it. Now save it by pressing Ctrl and S. Now we need to create another DAL file for inserting transaction details. So let's go to the Solution Explorer, and inside the DAL folder, just right click on DAL folder and click on add and go to new item, and here select the class and give the name. It will be transaction detail DAL, and click on add or press enter. So this will be our transaction DAL. So first step is to create connection string. So static string my connection string is equals to configuration manager dot connection strings, and here we'll pass connection string which we created in app.config file, and last one is connection string. So that's it. Now hover over the error and click on show potential fixes and click on using system.configuration. So that's it. We have successfully created a static string method for holding the value of connection string. Now we need to create a method to insert transaction detail. So let's create a region. So hash region insert method for transaction detail, and let's end the region. Now between this region we will create a method, boolean type method. So public bool insert transaction details, and we'll pass transaction detail BLL, it will be TD. So that's it. Now we do not need to get the transaction ID, so it will be this much only. Press enter and start curly braces. So hover over the transaction detail BLL and click on show potential fixes and using anystore.bll. So that's it, but we still have one error. In order to fix that error, we need to create a boolean value and set its default value to false. So bool is success equals false, and let's return it. Return is success. So this will fix the error. Now we need to create a database connection. So create a database connection here. For that, SQL connection con equals new, and SQL connection will pass connection string, that is my connection string. Hover over the error, click on show potential fixes and click on first option, which is using system.data.sql client. Now after creating SQL connection, we will write the actual code to insert the transaction details. For that, we will start with try blocks. So try and then catch exception ex, and we will display the message if we have any exceptional errors. So message box dot show ex dot message, that's it. And hover over the error and click on show potential fixes using system.windows forms. And last is finally we will close the database connection. So connection dot close, this will close the database connection. Now inside the try block, we will write the actual query to insert the transaction details in database. So query to insert transaction details. So string SQL equals insert into tbl underscore transaction detail, and we will need to pass the name of column. So let's go to Server Explorer, let's minimize TBL transactions, and let's maximize the TBL transaction detail. So TBL transaction detail, we need to have exact name in our query as well as in database table. So I was just checking that. Now we need to pass the columns like product ID, rate, quantity, total, decost ID, added rate, and added by. We do not need to pass ID since it is auto increment. So let's start with product ID. So first one is product ID, and then rate, and then quantity, and then product ID, rate, quantity, then total and decost ID. So total, and then decost ID, and then total, decost ID, total, decost ID, added date, and added by. So added date, and the last one is added underscore by. Now let's copy all of this inside the parentheses by pressing Ctrl and C. Select all this inside the parentheses and press Ctrl and C, and after parentheses give a space and type values and paste it here. So inside each of them insert at the rate. So at the rate product ID, at the rate rate, at the rate quantity, at the rate total, at the rate decost ID, at the rate added date, and at the rate added by. So that's it. This is the query. Now we need to pass the value to the SQL query. Passing the value to the SQL query. For this we will create SQL command. SQL command cmd equals new SQL command, and we will use SQL and con. So that's it. Now passing the values using cmd. So cmd dot parameters dot add with value at the rate product ID, here td dot product ID, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value and at the rate and td dot rate, then cmd dot parameters dot add with value at the rate quantity td dot qty, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value at the rate total td dot total, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value at the rate decost ID. So td dot decost ID, and then cmd dot parameters dot add with value at the rate added date and td dot added date, and the last one is cmd dot parameters dot add with value and at the rate added underscore by and td dot added by. So that's it. Now we need to open the database connection. So open database connection. For that, connection dot open, and the next step is to declare integer variable and execute the query. So declare the integer variable and execute the query. So int rows is equals to cmd dot execute non-query. Here we will be using execute non-query since we do not need any value on column of the first column of the first row. So we will check if the rows number of rows affected. So if rows is greater than 0, then query executed successfully, else fail to execute query. Now when the query is executed successfully, we need to change the value of each success to true, else the value of each success will be false. So that's it, guys. We have successfully created transaction detail data access layer, and inside that we created a method to insert the detailed transaction detail. So this is it, guys. In the next video we will start working with our purchase and sales form, and the first step is to search the dealer and customer and get the values or get the details of dealer or customer in our respective text boxes, which is here. We will search the dealer or customer here, and based on the search keyword we will try to display the details in our text boxes like name, email, contact and address. So this will be done in next episode, so stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you have any confusion related to this video, then don't forget to comment. I will reply as soon as possible. So till then, see you soon. Bye bye.